The wheels of the plane touched down with a familiar jolt, signaling the end of a long journey. Lisa, a woman known for her stubbornness and fiery temper, had just returned from an extended overseas assignment. She was eager to see her husband, Alex, who was supposed to meet her at the airport. However, as she scanned the crowd of expectant faces, his was notably absent. Undeterred, Lisa hailed a cab and directed the driver to a luxury hotel downtown. She figured Alex might be running late or caught up in traffic. As the cityscape blurred past the window, she couldn't shake off a nagging feeling of unease. Something felt off, but she brushed it aside, attributing it to jet lag and the exhaustion from her trip. Upon arriving at the hotel, Lisa stepped out of the cab, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She strode into the opulent lobby, her eyes quickly adjusting to the soft, ambient lighting. The grandeur of the place was a stark contrast to the modest accommodations she had grown accustomed to during her assignment. She approached the reception desk, her smile confident and expectant. The receptionist greeted her with a professional smile, but as Lisa handed over her credit card, the smile faltered. The card was declined. Lisa frowned, trying another card, then another. Each one met with the same result. The receptionist's expression turned sympathetic, but Lisa's confusion morphed into frustration. She tried calling Alex, but his number was disconnected. Panic began to rise within her as she realized something was seriously wrong. Desperate for answers, Lisa asked the receptionist if there were any messages or reservations under her name. The receptionist checked the system, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. After a moment, she shook her head. There was nothing. Lisa's name was not associated with any reservations or accounts at the hotel. It was as if she had been erased from existence. Lisa stepped away from the desk, her mind racing. She tried accessing her bank accounts on her phone, but her login credentials were invalid. Her name was no longer associated with any of their joint accounts. It was like she had been wiped clean from their financial history. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Alex had not just failed to meet her. He had systematically cut her off from their shared life. As she stood there, bewildered and alone in the bustling lobby, a man approached her. He was dressed in a nondescript suit, his expression neutral. He handed her a sealed envelope, his voice low and measured. The envelope was from Alex. Inside, she would find the first clues to the nightmare that awaited her. But for now, all she could do was stare at the envelope, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. The return to emptiness was just the beginning of a journey she never saw coming. Lisa clutched the envelope tightly, her knuckles turning white as she made her way to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the growing dread within her. She tore open the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside, she found a neatly folded set of documents. As she began to read, her world started to crumble. The first document was a set of divorce papers, already signed by Alex. The sight of his signature, bold and final, sent a shiver down her spine. She couldn't believe he had gone this far, without even a hint of discussion. The next set of papers were bank statements, confirming what she had already suspected. All their joint accounts had been closed, the funds withdrawn. At the bottom of the envelope, she found a small key with a tag bearing the address of a storage locker across town. Her mind raced with questions. What was in the locker? Why had Alex done this? She felt a mix of anger and desperation. She needed answers, and the storage locker seemed like the next piece of the puzzle. Lisa hailed another cab, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. As the cab navigated the city streets, she tried to piece together the events leading up to this moment. Had there been signs she missed? Had Alex been planning this for long? The cab pulled up to the storage facility, a stark contrast to the luxury hotel she had just left. She made her way to the locker, the key feeling heavy in her hand. As she inserted it into the lock and turned, the click echoed loudly in the quiet corridor. She hesitated for a moment before pulling open the door. Inside, she found a single suitcase, her passport, and a wad of cash amounting to $100. It was a cruel reminder of her new reality. Alex had left her with barely anything. On top of the suitcase lay another note. She picked it up, her hand still shaking. The words were stark and cold. You wanted freedom? Now you have it. The message was clear. Alex had not only left her, but had systematically dismantled their life together, leaving her with nothing but a bitter taste of freedom. Lisa stood there, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had always been stubborn and hot-tempered, but this was a blow she hadn't seen coming. The storage locker, with its meager contents, was a stark reminder of her new reality. She was alone, betrayed, and with a future that seemed more uncertain than ever. But Lisa was not one to back down from a challenge. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was just the beginning of her fight to unravel Alex's plan and reclaim her life. Lisa stood in the dimly lit corridor of the storage facility, the reality of her situation sinking in like a heavy stone. The suitcase at her feet contained a few changes of clothes, her passport, and a mere $100 in cash. A pitiful sum compared to the life she had known. The note from Alex echoed in her mind. You wanted freedom? Now you have it. The words were a taunt, a cruel reminder of a wish she might have carelessly thrown out in a moment of frustration. She picked up the suitcase, the weight of it feeling like a physical manifestation of her burden. As she made her way out of the storage facility, she couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, as if Alex was somehow observing her every move. The city outside felt foreign and unwelcoming, a stark contrast to the familiar comfort she had known before her assignment. Lisa hailed a cab, her mind racing with questions and fears. She directed the driver to take her to a cheap motel, the kind of place she never imagined she'd find herself in. As the cab pulled up to the motel, she paid the driver with a portion of her meager cash, each bill feeling like a lifeline slipping through her fingers. The motel room was small and dingy, a far cry from the luxury hotel she had been at earlier. She sat on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking under her weight. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. She needed to reach out to someone, anyone who could help her make sense of this nightmare. But who could she trust? She dialed the number of an old friend, someone she thought she could rely on, but the call went unanswered. She tried another friend, then another. Each call met with silence. Panic began to rise within her as she realized that Alex had not only cut her off financially, but had also isolated her socially. Desperate, Lisa decided to visit an old friend in person. She took a bus across town, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. As she knocked on the friend's door, she felt a glimmer of hope. But when the door opened, the hope was quickly dashed. The friend's expression was cold, their voice distant. They knew about Alex's version of the story, and they weren't interested in hearing Lisa's side. The door closed in her face, leaving her standing alone on the doorstep. The betrayal stung deeply, but Lisa was not one to give up easily. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the next step. She needed to find out more about Alex's plan, to understand the extent of his betrayal. And there was one person who might have the answers she sought, Jason, her lover. With a heavy heart, Lisa made her way to Jason's place, hoping against hope that he would be the lifeline she desperately needed. But as she approached his door, she couldn't shake off the feeling that more surprises awaited her, and not the kind she was hoping for. Lisa stood outside Jason's apartment, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. She needed answers, and she hoped that Jason, her secret lover, would provide them. She knocked on the door, her breath catching in her throat as she waited. When the door finally opened, Jason's expression was far from welcoming. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and something else, something that sent a chill down her spine. Jason stepped aside, letting her in, but the atmosphere was tense. Lisa could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She needed to understand what was going on, and Jason was her best chance at getting some answers. "Jason, I need your help," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. She explained the events of the past few hours: the declined credit cards, the disconnected phone, the divorce papers, and the storage locker. As she spoke, Jason's expression grew darker, his eyes narrowing. When she finished, Jason let out a bitter laugh. "Lisa, you have no idea what you've walked into," he said, his voice cold. He handed her a folder, his movements abrupt. Inside, she found photographs, images of her and Jason together, taken without their knowledge. There were also printouts of emails and text messages, all documenting their affair in stark detail. Lisa's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Alex had known about their affair all along. He had hired a private investigator to gather evidence, documenting every secret meeting, every stolen moment. The extent of his betrayal was staggering. But even more chilling was the calculated way he had executed his plan. Jason explained that Alex had confronted him weeks ago, showing him the evidence and threatening to expose their affair to Lisa's employers. Jason had begged him not to, but Alex had been unmoved. He had made it clear that he intended to ruin Lisa, to make her pay for her betrayal. Lisa listened in horror as Jason recounted the conversation. Alex had not only planned to leave her, but had also systematically dismantled their life together. He had sold their house, transferred their cars to new owners, and liquidated every shared asset. He had even spread rumors among their friends and colleagues, painting Lisa as a cheater and a fraud. The magnitude of Alex's plan was overwhelming. Lisa had always known him to be meticulous, but this level of calculation was terrifying. She had underestimated him, and now she was paying the price. As she sat there, the folder of evidence in her lap, she realized that she was not just fighting for her marriage, she was fighting for her very survival. With a heavy heart, Lisa thanked Jason for the information and left his apartment. She stepped out into the cold night air, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She needed to find a way to counter Alex's plan, to reclaim her life and her reputation. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake off the feeling that the battle was far from over. Lisa walked through the city streets, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and strategies. She needed to counter Alex's meticulous plan, to find a way to reclaim her life and clear her name. But with each step, the weight of her situation grew heavier. She was alone, betrayed, and with few resources at her disposal. Her first instinct was to reach out to her friends, to rally support from those she thought she could trust. She dialed number after number, her heart sinking with each unanswered call. Those who did pick up were distant, their voices cold and unwelcoming. Alex had already spun his web of lies, painting Lisa as the villain in their shared story. Desperate, Lisa decided to visit an old friend in person, someone she had known for years. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. But when the door opened, the friend's expression was far from welcoming. They knew about Alex's version of the story, and they weren't interested in hearing Lisa's side. The door closed in her face, leaving her standing alone on the doorstep, the sting of betrayal fresh and raw. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't give up, not yet. She decided to visit another friend, someone she had confided in during her affair with Jason. But the result was the same: a cold shoulder, a closed door, and a stark reminder of her isolation. With each failed attempt to rally support, Lisa's desperation grew. She needed someone on her side, someone who could help her navigate this nightmare. In a last-ditch effort, she decided to visit Jason again, hoping that he might have had a change of heart. But as she stood outside his apartment, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. When Jason opened the door, his expression was far from welcoming. He looked at her with a mix of pity and anger, his voice cold as he spoke. "Lisa, you shouldn't have come back," he said, his tone final. He handed her an envelope, his movements abrupt. Inside, she found a letter from her employer, informing her that she had been fired. The news hit her like a physical blow. She had lost her job, her reputation, and her friends. Alex had executed his plan with ruthless efficiency, leaving her with nothing but the shattered remnants of her life. As she stood there, The letter crumpled in her hand. She realized that her counterattack had failed before it even began. She was alone, betrayed, and with a future that seemed more uncertain than ever. But Lisa was not one to back down from a challenge, and she knew that she had to find a way to fight back, no matter the cost. Lisa stood outside Jason's apartment, the letter from her employer crumpled in her hand. The finality of her situation was sinking in, and she felt a mix of anger and despair. She had lost her job, her friends, and her reputation, all thanks to Alex's meticulous plan. But she couldn't give up, not yet. She needed to understand the full extent of Alex's betrayal. She looked at Jason, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Jason, I need to know everything," she said, her eyes searching his. Jason hesitated for a moment before nodding, his expression grim. He invited her inside, the atmosphere tense and heavy with unspoken words. Once inside, Jason handed her a folder, his movements abrupt. "Alex gave me this," he said, his voice cold. "He wanted to make sure you knew the extent of his plan." Lisa opened the folder, her hands trembling slightly. Inside, she found more photographs, more printouts of emails and text messages, all documenting her affair with Jason in stark detail. But there was more. There were also documents from a private investigator, detailing every move she had made, every secret she had kept. As she flipped through the pages, she realized that Alex had known about their affair from the very beginning. He had been watching, waiting, and gathering evidence. The extent of his betrayal was staggering. But even more chilling was the calculated way he had executed his plan. Jason explained that Alex had not only documented their affair, but had also sent the evidence to HR at Lisa's job. The timing was impeccable. Alex had made sure that Lisa would be fired the same day she returned from her overseas assignment, leaving her with no time to react or defend herself. Lisa listened in horror as Jason recounted the details. Alex had thought of everything, down to the last detail. He had made sure that Lisa would be left with nothing, no job, no friends, no reputation. The magnitude of his plan was overwhelming, and Lisa couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and admiration for his meticulousness. But as she sat there, the folder of evidence in her lap, she realized that there was one more piece of the puzzle. In the envelope from Alex, she found a single chilling note. "You played with the wrong person." The words sent a shiver down her spine, a stark reminder of the game she had unwittingly played. Lisa looked at Jason, her expression determined. "I need to find Alex," she said, her voice steady. "I need to understand why he did this, and I need to find a way to fight back." Jason nodded, his expression grim. "I don't know where he is, Lisa," he said, "but I know he's not going to make it easy for you. He's vanished, sold the house, and left town. He's made sure that you have nothing left to fight with." Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself for the battle ahead. She knew that finding Alex would be a challenge, but she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As she left Jason's apartment, she couldn't shake off the feeling that the fight for her life was far from over. Lisa left Jason's apartment with a heavy heart, the folder of evidence tucked under her arm. The city streets felt colder and more unwelcoming than ever as she made her way back to the dingy motel that had become her temporary home. Each step was a reminder of the life she had lost, the betrayal she had suffered, and the battle she was now forced to fight. Back in her motel room, Lisa spread the contents of the folder across the small table. She looked at the photographs, the emails, and the notes, each piece a testament to Alex's meticulous planning. The note from Alex stood out among the rest. "You played with the wrong person." The words were a chilling reminder of the game she had unwittingly played and lost. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. She needed to reach out to someone, anyone who could help her make sense of this nightmare. But her contact list was a grim reminder of her isolation. Friends she had known for years were now strangers, their numbers disconnected or their voices cold and distant. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She needed to find a way to fight back, to reclaim her life and her reputation. But as she looked at the evidence before her, She realized that the battle was far from over. Alex had not only left her with nothing, but had also made sure that she had no way to fight back. Her career was in ruins. The letter from her employer was a stark reminder of the professional consequences of her actions. She had been blacklisted in her field, unable to get another job. The industry she had dedicated her life to was now closed to her, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. Lisa looked at the note from Alex, her eyes scanning the chilling words. "You dreamed of freedom. Now you're completely free. Enjoy." The sarcasm was a bitter pill to swallow, a cruel reminder of the freedom she had once sought. But this was not the freedom she had imagined. This was a nightmare, a reality she could never have prepared for. As she sat there, the weight of her situation pressing down on her, Lisa realized that she was truly alone. Betrayed, broke, and with a ruined reputation, she had nowhere to turn. The life she had known was gone, and the future seemed more uncertain than ever. But Lisa was not one to back down from a challenge, and she knew that she had to find a way to fight back, no matter the cost. With a heavy heart, she picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over the one contact she knew would still answer. Her mother. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she even wanted to hear a familiar voice. But as she looked at the phone, she realized that she had no other choice. She needed help, and her mother was the only lifeline she had left. As she dialed the number, she couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. Lisa sat in her motel room, the phone pressed to her ear, listening to the familiar ringtone. Her heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and dread as she waited for her mother to answer. When the call connected, the sound of her mother's voice was a balm to her frayed nerves. She explained her situation, the words tumbling out in a rush of emotion. Her mother listened in silence, her occasional murmurs of sympathy a small comfort. When Lisa finished, her mother's response was immediate and unwavering. "Come home, Lisa," she said, her voice steady and sure. "We'll figure this out together." The offer was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the darkness that had become Lisa's life. But as she hung up the phone, she knew that she couldn't go home just yet. She needed to find Alex, to understand why he had done this, and to find a way to fight back. She couldn't let him get away with ruining her life without a fight. With renewed determination, Lisa began to piece together the clues she had. She knew that Alex had sold their house and left town, but she had no idea where he had gone. She started by contacting real estate agents, hoping to find a trail that would lead her to Alex. But each call was a dead end, each lead a disappointment. She turned to social media, scouring Alex's profiles for any hint of his whereabouts. But he had been thorough. He had deleted all his accounts, severing all possible means of contact. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Lisa refused to give up. She knew that Alex was too meticulous to leave without a plan, too calculated to disappear without a trace. She began to dig deeper, using every resource she had to find him. She contacted old colleagues, distant relatives, anyone who might have a clue to his whereabouts. But each lead was a dead end, each hope dashed. As the days turned into weeks, Lisa's desperation grew. She was running out of money, out of options, and out of time. She knew that she couldn't keep living in the motel, couldn't keep chasing shadows. She needed to find Alex to confront him, to understand why he had done this. But as she sat in her motel room, the folder of evidence spread out before her, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was chasing a ghost. With a heavy heart, Lisa picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over her mother's number. She knew that she had to make a choice, to keep chasing Alex or to go home and start rebuilding her life. As she dialed the number, she couldn't shake off the feeling that this was a turning point, a moment that would define her future. But as she listened to the ringtone, she knew that she had to make a decision, no matter how difficult it was. Lisa sat in her motel room, the phone still in her hand, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. The offer to come home was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the darkness that had become her life. But as she looked around the dingy room, she knew that going home wouldn't solve her problems. She needed to face her new reality, no matter how harsh it was. She had been betrayed, her life dismantled piece by the man she had once loved. She had lost her job, her friends, and her reputation. She was broke, with nowhere to turn and no one to rely on. The life she had known was gone, and the future seemed more uncertain than ever. But as she sat there, the weight of her situation pressing down on her, Lisa realized that she had a choice. She could wallow in self-pity, letting the betrayal and the loss define her. Or she could fight back, rebuild her life, and create a new future for herself. She looked at the folder of evidence, the photographs, and the notes spread out before her. She had been played, manipulated, and betrayed. But she was not a victim. She was a fighter, a survivor, and she was not going to let Alex's actions define her. With renewed determination, Lisa began to plan her next steps. She knew that she couldn't keep living in the motel, couldn't keep chasing shadows. She needed to find a way to support herself, to rebuild her life and her reputation. She needed to find a way to move forward, no matter how difficult it was. She started by looking for a job, any job that would help her make ends meet. She applied for positions she never would have considered before, her pride swallowed by necessity. She knew that rebuilding her career would take time, but she was willing to start from the bottom and work her way up. She also began to reach out to old contacts, people she had known before her affair with Jason, before her life had been turned upside down. She explained her situation, her voice steady and sure. She knew that she had made mistakes, that she had hurt people, but she was willing to own up to her actions, to apologize, and to make amends. As the days turned into weeks, Lisa began to see a glimmer of hope. She found a job, a small apartment, and a sense of purpose. She knew that rebuilding her life would take time, that the road ahead would be difficult. But she was determined to face her new reality, to create a new future for herself. For the first time, Lisa understood what it felt like to be the one left behind, to be betrayed and abandoned. But she also understood the strength that came from survival, the resilience that came from rebuilding. And as she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman who was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. She was ready to face her new reality, no matter what it threw at her. Lisa sat in her small apartment, the hum of the city outside her window a distant echo of the life she had once known. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change, a journey of self-discovery and resilience. She had faced her new reality head-on, rebuilding her life piece by piece. She had found a job, a modest position that allowed her to make ends meet. It was a far cry from the career she had once had, but it was a start. She had also begun to rebuild her relationships, reaching out to old friends and colleagues, owning up to her mistakes and making amends. It was a slow process, but she was determined to see it through. As she looked around her apartment, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had furnished it with thrift store finds and DIY projects, each piece a testament to her newfound independence. She had learned to cook, to budget, and to find joy in the simple things. She had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew she had. But as she sat there, she couldn't shake off the memories of the past. The betrayal, the loss, and the pain were still fresh in her mind. She knew that she had made mistakes, that she had hurt people. But she also knew that she had been played, manipulated, and betrayed. The scars of that betrayal ran deep, but she was determined not to let them define her. She picked up the final note from Alex, her fingers tracing the words. "You dreamed of freedom. Now you're completely free. Enjoy." The sarcasm was a bitter pill to swallow, a cruel reminder of the freedom she had once sought. But as she looked at the note, she realized that she was free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal. She was free to create a new future for herself, a future built on honesty, resilience, and strength. With a heavy heart, Lisa picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over her mother's number. She had put off the call for too long, afraid to face the familiar voice, afraid to admit her failures. But as she dialed the number, she knew that it was time to face her fears, to embrace her new reality and to start anew. As the call connected, the sound of her mother's voice was a balm to her frayed nerves. She explained her situation, her voice steady and sure. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that rebuilding her life would take time. But she also knew that she was not alone, that she had the strength and the resilience to face whatever came her way. And as she hung up the phone, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She saw a woman who was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. She saw a woman who was ready to face the future, no matter what it threw at her. She saw a woman who was ready to embrace her new reality, to create a new future for herself. And as she took a deep breath, she knew that this was not the end.